my first idea that I have in mind. So I don't mind having a lot of classes, a lot of work, but when I don't have, so opportunity to travel, this makes me crazy. Especially when you can't travel to places that you love, right? And to people that you like. Yeah. And some educational places that you would like to visit. This is terrible. I understand. But you have a vaccine, so Terry, right?
Well, yes, but I'm not sure when I will get it. But I think this is only the 4th year out of 53 years of working in the office that I haven't been to the office.
Okay.
6 точно заканчиваем.
So Olga, we can even finish earlier than 6. So can we start? Yes. So Olga is responsible for telling us when to start. So Olga, can we start? Yes, let's start.
Yes, let's start.
Let's start. Some more people also will come. So later will join us. It's not that bad. Okay. So good morning and good afternoon to everyone. And so I would like to welcome you on behalf of Tom State University and organizers of this panel discussion, Teaching and Learning in and After 2020. We highly appreciate that you have joined us at the time when this favorite word now, this unprecedented change, has implications for everyone involved in education. And we are trying our best to create a new normal, so built on, looking for new prospects and possibilities. And so we are honored to have today such respected speakers who will talk on finding these opportunities, building these opportunities and strategies that will lead to, I hope that it will lead to making the English language part of our cultural and educational lives. So I would kindly remind our speakers that they have 15-minute limit, perhaps, of their presentations. And then, so we are inviting questions. After each presentation, we are inviting questions and comments. So feel free to ask any. Well, and I would like to introduce the first speaker. So this is one of my favorite colleagues, Dr. Peter Mitchell, so head of Department of Translation and Language Communication. So a frequent speaker at various international conferences and forums, and always, so his presentations attract a lot of attention. So I'm handing over to you, dear Peter. So welcome.
Thank you, Tamara, for that kind introduction. Thank you, dear colleagues, for coming, and it's great to see a large number of students as well. I would like to thank Olga and Tamara for their wonderful organization of today's event, and it's great to see such a number of respected speakers from a wide range of spheres as well. It's great that despite current events, we are all able to gather here together, at least digitally. I hope we can see my slides. I imagine we can. Yes. Excellent, thank you. So today I would like to address the topic of transcending borders in the post-pandemic global job market, a topic that is close to the hearts of many in academic, but perhaps more importantly for our students, undergraduates, postgraduates, doctoral students, postdocs, and so on. We understand that one of our main aims in the university is to prepare people to enter employment in a wide variety of spheres, but sometimes we don't do that as effectively or efficiently as perhaps we could. The background to this topic for me was led primarily by the dramatic rise in demand for online courses in 2020. The demand for online courses has been on the rise for the last decade or so. But of course, we see that this year, for obvious reasons, the demand has risen exponentially. We see that the university has met this demand by growing the number of online courses that it offers, and we see a desire to reach a worldwide audience. And this is what led me to create a particular course after helping students at TSU enter the job market. It was important for me to try to reach a wider audience. And we see that online learning, of course, does have its pros and cons, but if it's not still yet the norm, it is certainly an inevitability, I think, in today's climate. And if we are faced with that inevitability, then of course we need to try to make our online learning as effective as possible. We need to ensure that it is embedded in quality as far as possible, and so on. This led to an analysis of the target audience, competition, and demand for employment. Not so much a hard task, because of course the issue of employment is one that in basic terms affects everyone, whether they are economists or biochemists or whatever. We understand that students of any speciality aim at one point or another in their lives to enter the job market, and therefore we see that the target audience in this case is, if not universal, certainly it encompasses all those people who perhaps are interested in working in an English-speaking country or in an international company that uses English. As for competition, at the moment, there is a lot of information on the internet to help people enter the job market. Much of which, however, is of poor quality, dubious origin, and so on. At the same time, demand is rising and rising. And the course that I eventually developed, Career Planning, Resume, CV, Cover Letter, Interview, is a course that was launched on Coursera on the 18th of June this year. I'll speak a little more later about how successful this course became and the response to it. But for me, the most important thing was to reach a large audience, enabling that audience to understand the various requirements that exist for those who want to work in English-speaking countries, or indeed, as I mentioned, for international companies where English is used. Finding an ideal vacancy, luckily, doesn't involve traveling by boat. There are other important considerations to bear in mind, and these are perhaps the starting points, thinking about our goals, short-term, medium, long-term, strengths and weaknesses, hard and soft skills, dream companies, how to search for a job, and then when you actually find your dream vacancy, how to apply for that. So it starts with each person having to understand themselves very well. And only when we start with ourselves can we truly understand where we might find our place in the world. And looking at the learners that I've had so far in the course, a lot of them don't take this basic thing into account, that they need to do a very full self-analysis before they think about what they might be suited to. And I'm sure we all know plenty of people who are unhappy in their work situations, people who entered a particular field or applied for a particular job, not thinking about whether this was the best move for them. And of course, we need to think very carefully about our own desires and our own abilities, and hopefully we can reconcile the two. Constructing a resume, of course, is no less important. When we found that dream vacancy, we understand that we need to construct our resume, and our resume, of course, is our key marketing tool to market ourselves in terms of the job. And this requires an understanding of those expectations that employers have when we're looking at a resume. Aspects of culture and content, the idea that in some countries we should include our photo in the resume, in other countries we shouldn't. What other information should we include? In many countries, including information like date of birth or marital status or number of children might positively deny a person an opportunity for to be interviewed. Whereas in other countries, it's an expectation. We need to understand that there is no one resume that fits every country. And English-speaking countries, of course, also have different expectations within them as well. Resume design, also important to bear in mind, depending on one stage in a career. Should we use a reverse chronological design, a functional design, combination? Many students in Russia, at least, make the mistake of just listing a set of adjectives: hardworking, responsible, etc., etc., when, of course, we ought to be showcasing our skills in a much more effective manner, strategically demonstrating exactly what we've done and what achievements that led to. Composing a cover letter, here, of course, this is our opportunity to make a personal connection with the recruiter. And it's very important to make that connection, bearing in mind, again, issues of culture and content, how to personalize the cover letter, and so on. Also, preparing for interviews. Preparing for our interview, of course, when we come to an interview, it's a little like a blind date sometimes. Yes, we don't know what to expect, and the recruiter also doesn't know what to expect. And it's at this meeting that we can understand what the kind of fit is for the company as well. And here we need to be prepared for a wide range of things that occur. Firstly, of course, how to prepare, looking at simple things like appearance, manners, how we dress, how we greet the person, how we present ourselves professionally. The STAR method: situation, task, action, results, talking about what we did in our job and what we achieved when we're answering questions. And of course, the different types of questions that we are asked as well, whether they are standard, non-standard, behavioral, etc. So it's particularly important to bear in mind the different fashions, the trends that now exist when it comes to job interviews. If we look at the value of such a course to learners, we can see certain points that I think stand out: the 100% practical content. Of course, anything has to be fairly priced for learners as well. There are many things on the internet that charge for very little, and but through a platform such as Coursera, it's possible to reach a large audience and ensure that the price is fair for people from different countries as well. An individual learner trajectory, we understand, is no less important in today's climate, when students are doing their best to cope with new ways of studying. When you have no timetable, no deadlines, this is perhaps a particular advantage of online courses. Individual consultations are very important, bearing in mind each person's individual circumstances and unique talents. A certificate is useful for many students now when they apply for their different stipends and so on. Perhaps most importantly, lifelong access to the course materials, because we understand that our students, our graduates, are not going to apply just for one job and stay in that job throughout their lifetime. At least we hope not. We understand that every few years they will be looking to change their job, to get promoted, to move somewhere else, etc. And being able to access the course again and again on a needs basis is particularly beneficial for our students, ensuring that they can be prepared for all their future dream job applications. Evaluating an online course is perhaps sometimes even easier than evaluating an offline course in a university, because there are certain objective statistics that we can look at, everything from landing page visitors to enrollments, completions, progress funnel, the reach of the course itself, the ratings, naturally, reviews that students leave, the stories that they write, and of course when students share the course on social media as well. So all this makes course evaluation much, much easier in my experience. And if we look at the statistics in this case, we can see that 51% of landing page visitors enrolled in the course. So it's obviously an attractive course. At the moment, this is from the 18th of June this year, 34,195 learners from 168 countries. That was as of yesterday. Approximately 250 plus new learners daily. What's interesting is at the beginning, when the course was launched, the vast majority, around 2/3 of the learners, were aged between 18 to 24. That has now decreased, and we're seeing larger proportions of older learners, between 25 and 34, 35 and 44, and even 45 plus. So it's interesting to see that a lot of people now are of an perhaps older generation are now accessing the course and finding it useful. In terms of sex, 56% male, 43% female, 1% other, which is actually more equitable than most courses on Coursera. Coursera typically has 60% male in this case, and around 39% or 40% female. This is a little more evenly spread. And if we look at top 10 learner locations, here we can see countries which, many of which have a particular focus on developing innovative economies. So it's good to see that a lot of people from these countries are accessing the course and appreciating it as well. And shortly after the course launch, it very quickly became one of the top 20 most popular online courses worldwide. That was for July 2020. On social media, we see that a range of course learners are spreading the word, and it's great to see that learners are appreciating this course. It's good advertising for our university as well, and I hope it leads to people enrolling on other courses. We do have a huge range of courses in a wide variety of subjects at our university, and it's also nice to receive those personal messages from students when they talk about how they appreciated the course and how it helped them and so on. For me, the best messages are those. I got one recently from a student who had been, or a recent graduate who had been looking for a vacancy, looking for a job for several months, and after completing the course within, I think, 3 weeks, that person already was able to find a job. And I can't claim total responsibility for that. Certainly the message that I got led me to believe that the course had played a significant role in allowing that person to present themselves in a much more effective manner. To conclude, therefore, the conclusion is perhaps a little axiomatic, but we understand that success depends not only on our talents, but also, of course, on the student's ability to market those talents in the global market. And we understand, of course, that in today's climate, that is not easy. We need to provide as many opportunities as we can for our students to do that. And in a digital learning environment, we see that we do have those platforms that allow us to promote certain courses to our students. We hope that those courses are based on quality rather than anything else. And it's great to see that students from around the world, and not only in Russia. If I look at the main statistics, I think only 3% of the learners on this course are from Russia. So there's a huge international following as well. And it really does underline, I think, the international appeal of such courses. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take up more of your time, and I'm sure there are some questions that you might want to answer. Let me just thank you for your kind attention, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much, Peter. Well, as usual, so very interesting, very informative, and very, very, very good and well structured as all your presentations. So thank you very much. So any questions or comments, please?
Thank you, Tamara. You're my biggest fan, I think.
Yes, I am. Yeah, that's right. Good. So any questions? Well, even from students? No? No. Okay. Good. Maybe after all the presentations, right? Then comments or questions. Good. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, yes, perhaps the lack of questions is due to the fact that I think a lot of our audience did recently attend a seminar that
maybe.
was organized on this. I have possibly answered all their questions,
okay.
At least so far. But it is great to see that working with our students, and I'm proud to work not only at the Faculty of Foreign Languages, but also with economists, with students on the Tomsk International Science Program, where I teach academic English, and there are immensely talented students there, as I'm sure you know, and it's a great pleasure to be able to make that contribution to those students that we have and around the world.
Good. So Peter, again, so thank you for your contribution, and thank you that really, I can ask you for any advice, and you agree to participate in all such events of such a kind. Thank you. That
If
it's
ever
really
you find yourself looking for a job, I'd be glad to help out.
Yes, yes.
Can I make a
Thank
comment?
Okay, good. Yes, please. Yes, please.
I would just like to congratulate Peter. I think that he's found an important niche in the market. Everyone will need that advice at some stage in their lives. So well done, Peter. I think it's a great need that you've addressed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's something that it is something that all our graduates need, and I think it's more and more universities, of course, are going to have to address this need. Not everywhere has it been done very well. In my experience, I graduated from the University of Durham, a decent university, but at the time there was very little available in terms of career advice, which I think was one thing that was missing. And I'm sure that more universities will be paying closer attention to this in the future.
Agree. Agree. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. Good. So, and now it's my pleasure to introduce another speaker, so one more speaker, and this is Will Nash, Academic Director of English Language Teaching Center of Sheffield University, a person we met in 2016 who helped Thompson State University in starting to create English speaking environment, and the person who introduced English as a medium of instruction at Thompson State University. So please, you're welcome, Will.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to those of you in different time zones. I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully that will work.
Good.
So just a thumbs up if you can see the screen now. Good. Great. It's really interesting actually that Terry Callahan is here today as well, just because Terry, I've only ever met you in Russia, in Tomsk, once, and now I'm meeting you again online, and I'm guessing you're somewhere a few miles away. I don't know where you are at the moment, but you're in Sheffield. So this tells you a little bit about the world we live in, that Terry and I only meet in an international context when we only live down the road from each other. So it's lovely to see people locally and globally, and certainly my friends in Tomsk. Interestingly, this opportunity, I'm sitting here with a virtual background, partly because I am in bed. This is because I have an operation last week on my ankle. And so there would be no opportunity for me to travel at the moment, even if I wanted to. So the fact that I can come to you virtually today is very, very special to me. And I have been doing that over the last few months with Tamara and the Institute, working with some of your students now and again. So I'm going to just summarize a few of my experiences of teaching and learning language during and after 2020, as that is my specialism and that is what I've been doing with my teachers and students both in Sheffield and around the world. So let's start with the present. Let's start with some interesting words. I love words, and there are a few new ones that we've had to learn in English this year, as we know, unprecedented. This situation was unprecedented for us. There was not in living memory a pandemic like this, and I guess many of us don't remember the impact that world events like the Second World War had on learning and teaching. And the idea of ramping up, that just the pure space, the pace of change for learning and teaching and for learners and teachers was incredible. Just and the effect that lockdown had on all of us, just the way it affected our personal lives and our professional lives. If you're interested more about this, the Oxford English Dictionary normally has a single word of the year. Every year they announce it. What is their new word? Well, this year they couldn't have one. They had 13 instead, and all of them were connected with the pandemic. That's how important the pandemic was for language. And that it changed across the English-speaking world. For example, lockdown was very important in the UK, Canada, and Australia. Something I've not heard of, shelter in place in the US. If you've got a US, this is where you are sheltering in your home away from the pandemic. In Singapore and the UK, we had a circuit breaker. So all of these things contributed to our learning and teaching of languages in the initial present day period. For those of you who are interested more, there is a link there to, or just Google OUP, Oxford University Press, Word of the Year, and you'll find there 13 words of the year, and there's a presentation from the lexicographers at the Oxford English Dictionary next week about how they selected these words. So some of the challenges then for me personally and for my team of teachers and my learners, well, the challenge was it was very reactionary. There wasn't much planning for this, to be honest. So we were having to react to changes that we were all experiencing in the learning and teaching, you know, as on a day-to-day, if not hour by hour or minute by minute basis, when things like the technology was failing us. And that was the second challenge. It was, we were thrust into using a multiple different types of technology. Some of us had never had to use this before for our learning and teaching, and other times it was by choice. So this was very much a challenge for us as teachers, and it involved an awful lot of trial and error and training. And this is where perhaps training and development has been shown to be a critical part of teaching and learning, both for teachers and for students. And generally, our approaches had to change as well. The way that we looked at things like blended learning and the concept of flipped learning, although they had been around for a number of years and in decades in some cases, the fact that the pace of change had to force us into using them. And, this was a real challenge for us to be able to change our approaches to learning and teaching in an effective and appropriate manner. And this had a real impact on our overall, both students and teachers, our well-being and health. And there's been a real reported increase in the amount of mental health issues with students and with teachers, mainly maybe due to isolation or again the pace of change being too much for us to cope with. And this has created many, along with the lockdown generally, all of these changes created a huge amount of missed learning. The missed learning that we have all had as learners, and the missed opportunities for teaching has meant that certainly in schools that that they are predicting, or the formative assessment they're doing is suggesting that learners are at a disadvantage presently. They have missed huge chunks of the curriculum, and the way that we've reacted as educators is, at the moment, we're changing some of the assessment practices that we're doing. There's been a lot of changes to how we're grading students this year, but it's still to be seen the long-term impacts on the learning experiences of learners presently, and that hasn't finished yet. However, and more positively, the opportunities, for me and for others, there's been a huge amount of reflection and dialogue happening about learning and teaching generally presently. Partly because the space we've been given, perhaps, more time at home, more time to focus on our own self-reflection on our life situations, but generally on our professional situations too. And the technological development has been part of that. We can honestly say that we will never be going back, I don't think, in terms of our knowledge and use of technology in learning and teaching. It may change in the future as new approaches are developed and are consolidated. And we are going to achieve this, I think, through collaboration. The opportunities that I have had for collaboration between learners and teachers within my institution, but also across the world, because how often do you have a single event that creates a similar situation for everybody at the same time creates a huge amount of empathy and therefore rapid progress. We can truly say that the opportunity for us to change, if we want it to happen, has happened presently. These things for rapid progress have created opportunities for our future that we will or will not take on, depending on whether we take these opportunities up, or institutions or assessment practices will allow us to do that. So there's clearly been challenges and opportunities in the present situation for learning and teaching. Generally with language, I want to just, this is something I presented in a global conference recently, but I want to just read you something that I've started to consider important, language generally and the place of language in the world, especially when it comes to situations where communication and collaboration is so important. I'm going to read this out, but hopefully the screen is quite small, but hopefully for those of you in particular second language speakers can read this and understand it slightly more. So language ebbs, flows, thrives and disappears as it linguistically travels. And this changes with the development of the world. Like aspects of globalization, some languages have benefited. They have more people using them, learning them and teaching them in multiple mediums in time zones than ever before. Presently, the 6 official languages of the United Nations, which includes both Russian and English, are arguably growing or stable and are controlled well. However, policies at the local and international level seem fragmented and territorial, like those of other global borderless phenomena, for example, a pandemic. So Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, said recently in a BBC interview that communications between the global superpowers were at an all-time low. Communication needs some form of language to do that. The global local interface for language has resulted in the linguistic death of thousands of languages, literally dozens in the last few months alone. So what do these successes and extinctions tell us about the state of language in the world at the moment? And where does language fit in to the new ideas of communication and cooperation on this global level in the future? So language teaching and language learning is clearly going to be an important part of our future. So what is the future, the possible future for us as language teachers or teachers in general or learners in general? Well, one of the other words of the year, which will probably be next year, is back to normal. There's a huge amount of political pressure and economic pressure in the world to get back to normal. But I honestly think in terms of learning and teaching, we'll be getting back to some form of partial normality. I think some of the changes that have happened in the last in the last year are here to stay. I'm not entirely sure which ones will be the normal and which ones won't yet. I'm on the fence about that. But I do believe that the difference is rather than reactionary changes, we will be making more proactive changes to our learning and teaching. We will be more in control of this rather than the pandemic controlling us. And that is where we want to get back to, I think, in our learning and teaching. I do believe that the learning and teaching world has changed completely in terms of its global, local, relationships. I think that we are much more aware of the impact that the global, local interactions have on our learners in the future. When I talk about the local, I mean how important it is to both prepare our learners for the global context. So globalization has been around for 30, 40 years as a phenomenon. But we must understand that we live in a very local world. I mean, to the point of living in our cities in a lockdown situation. That can happen again. So we need to be more sustainable in our learning and teaching in both that global and local context. I think we're going to have to start to reconsider the learning and teaching time zones. In the, I don't think we can, have the classic 9 till 5 o'clock, university type experience for learners. Possibly they were not having that anyway, with more pressure on kind of self-study and independent study and global connections through social media. But I think as us as educators will have to accept that our learners will be coming from a various different time zones around the world, especially if we are using a blended and online learning approach. And this also bumps into multi-modality. In the past, in higher education, the two main modalities of learning were reading and listening, and often were, the output for this was writing. But I do think that the opportunities that the pandemic and the just generally technology is going to allow us for far more mixed media approaches. So integration of video, audio, chat boxes, listening and taking notes at the same time. The idea of group chat rooms, or like this, a panel discussion on Zoom. These skills of multimodality impact on how we use language and how we develop approaches, pedagogic approaches to learning and teaching as well. And this comes back to how we integrate the technology in the general learning and teaching practices that we already have. Hybrid learning is a term that I've started to hear coined a lot more recently. And this is I think this for me will be the future of learning. It'll be not face-to-face, not online, and not even blended, but it'll be the choice of all of those possibilities of how we learn, so that the medium will be chosen at the most appropriate time. So the hybrid is that at times the whole module will be online, whereas at other times the whole module will be face-to-face. And that idea of hybrid, the best of both worlds, I think will be the future. And that will impact on our learning interactions as professors or teachers or lecturers. How we're going to interact with our learners will change. I think the idea of us turning up to a lecture or a seminar room, doing our work and then leaving and having maybe some communication via email will change. I think the expectations of the students will be that they will be able to access us as learners in more situations, both online and perhaps in more time, in different times as well. So therefore, how we're going to manage that process in the future will be an interesting one. And I think student expectations have changed forever about what they expect learning institutions to do for them, and value for money, and value for their time and effort, as they are being questioned considerably at the moment about what are they getting from their universities and from their colleges and schools during the lockdown process. So these are my just my thoughts and considerations for the present and the future of learning. But generally, I am becoming more and more positive, partly because I think the world is becoming more positive about the pandemic, and but just generally, I think the opportunities there for global interaction and some long-lasting change that can be proactive and positive to come out of this seems to be a realistic possibility from now on. So we're in this very interesting change period, and I will be very much looking forward to working with Thompson State University, the Institute of Economics and Finance, and other colleagues around the world to do that, both now in the present and in the future time to come. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So Will, again, so very interesting and very informative. So I have a question. Oh, there is some noise. Yes. So I have a question. So can you evaluate? So you were talking about realistic probability of working together. So what about your experience of working with students of Institute of Economics and Management? How important is it for you, for me, understand, so you can assess it? And I understand how important it is for students. So can you tell several words about that? Because it's really interesting, perhaps for participants to hear that.
So,
in my view, it's a unique experience. So what do you think?
The reason this happened was purely pragmatically that Tamara and I were supposed to meet in Manchester in April to deliver a joint conference presentation at IATEFL, the International Association of TEFL, English as a foreign language. And clearly that didn't happen. But we are friends, we are colleagues and professional colleagues, and the missed opportunity for us to meet was very disappointing and negative to both of us. We are people of the global world. We like to travel. So what we did was we decided that I would drop into sessions that were put on English for economics sessions put on by the Institute and led by Tamara, and I would come along and become a guest in those sessions. And this would allow us to collaborate not only with each other and to support each other through these linguistic, pedagogical and technological changes that we were both experiencing and needing to have an outlet for, but also to add value to the experience of the students, and to have the both of us in the room, to have this global local perspective, and for me to have some sense of what was happening in Tomsk, and for them to have some sense of what was happening in Sheffield in the United Kingdom, and for us to just understand what was happening in the world, just for a purely human contact and empathy. But it started then to become a real opportunity to see what the future of language learning could look like. We started to play different roles. I would be looking at the chat box and doing correction of their grammar or phonology, or they would ask me questions about language, or I would lead by speaking to them and asking them to react to what I was saying. Tamara would organize a reading activity and then get them to present back to us what they had read. So the opportunities were there that came out of something which was a need for just personal and professional contact, but it has led to potentially a future way of working. And I'm very pleased to be a visiting teacher at the Institute, named on the website. It's great for me professionally and for me personally. So a very interesting opportunity for me and Tamara.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Will, so very much, and thank you that you agreed to come. And so as Peter, so always come to all events organized by Tom State University. It's so pleasing, to us, and nice, wonderful. Okay, so any more questions or comments? Maybe questions for Will. So we have Artyom, for example, here. So a student from my group of students economists. So, and Will is his teacher now. So Artyom, maybe you will tell us several words about our experience. So just several words. Okay.
Well, hello. Could you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
That's great. So I have some problems with my microphone. So sorry for that.
Now it's good.
Well, the experience we with my mates had and have from Will Nash is quite interesting, because all this situation is about global process, and when you can have an ability or an opportunity to communicate with the professor of Sheffield University, it's very exciting. And of course, also all this practice we had. The practice is very useful, because I'm very interested in learning English, and I try to to support my level. Will Nash is a real supporter in this situation, and I'm very glad to have this opportunity. And also I hope that this opportunity takes another opportunity, and we will have more tutors and more native speaker tutors and colleagues from foreign universities, and we will have an experience to meet with them in the future, I hope.
Yeah, thank you, Artyom. Thank you very much. Okay, good. So now I'm delighted to introduce another speaker. So this is Evgenia. And again, this is Institute of Economics and Management. So she's assistant professor there and director of International Exchange Center of Institute of Economics and Management. And she is a person we have been collaborating always. So on this issue of creating English language environment, and you will see how it could be on the example of one institution, so at the Thompson State University. So you're welcome, Evgenia.
Thank you, Tamara Yurina, and dear colleagues, thank you for inviting me to take part in this panel discussion. And in my report, I'd like to reflect how the Institute of Economics and Management is trying to support the English-speaking environment during a pandemic. So let's go back to a few months ago and remember what kind of events took place at the Institute at the beginning of 2020. So in February, we had such situation like some of our students started to come back to Tomsk. I mean, those students who took part in the exchange programs. In early March, we had cancellation of the international lectures, but actually we prepared for these events for 2 or 3 months before, and that's why we had to cancel it. In April, it was a cancellation of the faculty business trips, and we also prepared in advance for this. In May, we had to cancel the advisory board meeting. It's a really important event for our institute because we invite lots of international academic staff, professors and CEOs to give some open lectures, to give some master classes for our students, but we had to cancel it as well. In June, our students decided to come back home. Our international students started to come back home, and we didn't know when they're going to come back to Tomsk next time. And in early July, we had some fear of lack of recruitment of foreign students for 2020, according to the possibility to come to Russia. But time went by, and let's see what kind of results do we have by the beginning of December. So actually right now we understand that our students can study abroad even in such period of time. Right now our students study at the University of Verona and Normandy Business School, Deggendorf Institute of Technology, and you can see some reviews of our students, how they like to study there. Actually, some of them study in France, some of them used to study online, but it's also a great opportunity to improve their language skills. We also started to invite foreign professors to conduct classes even more often than we did it before. Because it depends on the time frame, it depends on the visas and other stuff that we have to do to prepare for the invitation. And our students sometimes discuss some international cases with, for example, Professor Jean-Paul Larson from France. Also, we launched new course like Circular Economy with a CEO from France, who also conducted some classes. Students discussed some cases and tried to launch new product who meets the circular economy needs. As for our international management program, we have a master program that is implemented in English. In the beginning of June, we started to worry about that we could not recruit some international students for this program. And in order to solve this problem, we have to be more active online. So we decided to launch some new platform. We used Bittrex. We also created lots of videos with our international students, and we started to use lots of social platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and so on, in order to pay attention to our program, our institute, and so on. So actually we became more social, and our international students also helped us to create new content, to inspire, to maybe to shoot some videos and interviews. And here you can see our reaction and engagement of our and not only our international students. And as a result, you can see the geography of our students in 2020. We had even more students than 1 year before. We recruit some students from Nigeria, Cameroon, Colombia, Chile, and so on. As a result, we also right now we have enough time for our academic staff to improve their English skills. For example, right now we took part in some foreign language course that is implemented at TSU, and 15 of our academic staff already passed the Oxford online placement test, and very soon we'll start to improve their skills in order to give some classes in English. What kind of results we have till by early December 2020. So right now we understand that study abroad during a pandemic is really possible. We understand that even in such situation, we can even implement our program in English. We can invite new professors, and we can also invite some students from Europe or from South America, for example, and they could study online. We regularly invite foreign academic staff, as I told you, even more often than we did it before. And we understand that we were able to be more effective online. We also got new opportunities for training academic staff, and I would like to conclude my report with an Indonesian proverb that nothing is difficult when you get used to it. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I would be grateful to answer.
Good. Well, thank you, Eugenia. Really very interesting and unexpected ending, perhaps, right? And very favorable prospects. So it's possible to study abroad, right? And to study here, right?
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So as I told you, in the beginning of February, we had lots of fears that it's impossible. So we had to cancel everything. But right now, of course, everything is possible. And sometimes it's even easier to organize than it was 1 year before, because right now we should not plan the arrival time, for example, in maybe 2 or 3 months before. We can do it maybe for 2 or 1 week.
Right. So I agree with you completely. So perhaps it's really easier to meet online, right? And to do everything quicker. Okay, good. So any questions, maybe? Questions, comments? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
good.
I would like to
yes,
just
please.
say...
Yes, please. Yes.
It's really, really interesting to me. I mean, I think the future is this kind of world collaboration. English is a medium of instruction, obviously. I have a question. Do you have a sense of where the students are going to come from for these programs in the future? What's your kind of target market for Thompson State University?
Yeah, so right now we suppose that our target market is China, and China, Laos, and maybe even Thailand, yes, because they have an attitude to Russian education, because their parents studied here before, and their parents suppose and give advice to their students, their children, that they also have to get their diploma, their education in Russia. So that is why we have more than maybe 30 or more than even 40% from China. So that is why we decided to launch a new track even in Chinese language. So next year we will give some special opportunity for these students who could study in Chinese and in English. And we also had right now we have some collaboration with some university from France. And we are going to launch double degree diploma for master students who also can study in Russia and in France. It would be also great to have some students,
Good.
for example.
Good.
Thank you. Congratulations on everything. I would also like to say I'm sorry, but I do have to go now. I'm teaching in Indonesia in the next hour, online again. So I wish you very well wherever you are in the world, and I'm sure I'll get to see some of you again. So goodbye.
Yeah. Thank you, Will, for coming. Thank you. Goodbye. So talk with you later. Okay, good. So Miriam, are you with us? Miriam? Yes? Can you? So yes. So Miriam, thank you for coming. So so Evgenia, so this is a teacher who is going to participate in an interview just in an hour with you, perhaps, or with your colleagues.
Excellent. With one of my colleagues, yes.
yeah, that's right. And thank you very much that you have joined us, because
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, I'm sure that it's interesting for you too. Okay, good. So
Definitely.
now I'm delighted to welcome another speaker. So this is Torsten Mercer. So I hope I have pronounced Torsten, your name correctly. And he's senior researcher from Ludwig Maximilian University from Munich, Germany. And so I have never suspected that we could meet with Torsten at the conference in Munich in 2019, and that it could lead to our, I hope, possible collaboration, but even collaboration now. And he's here to talk about some issues related to digital competences of language teachers, foreign language teachers. So you're welcome. So please. Torsten, can you hear me? So you're welcome. Torsten, can you hear? Yes, you can start, yes, with your presentation.
Maybe my headset wasn't working properly, so I just dropped the headset. Thanks, Tamara, for the kind introduction. You pronounced my name absolutely correctly, so no worries about that. And I'm located in Munich, as you said, a few hours, time zones and miles away from Tomsk, but this digital context really makes it possible for us to cooperate. And it's easy to travel to Tomsk via Zoom, of course. And in Munich, I work as a teacher educator for English language teachers. And we do have a standing research interest in digital competences. So when the pandemic hit us and everyone had to move from brick and mortar teaching to digital teaching or asynchronous digital teaching, we felt that we were pretty well prepared to cope with that challenge. But as Will said, much of it was reactionary. We were teaching in different time zones. We had to introduce new and different assessment formats. But I also sympathize with what Eugenia said a bit earlier, trying to make the best out of it, being productive, being creative with the situation rather than becoming depressive about it. And that actually leads me to this talk on our innovations in education in times of crisis and disruption. And as Tamara said, the focus will be on digital competence development, because the pandemic suddenly has shown that when teachers have to teach in digital environments, they need digital competences desperately. But at the same time, we also believe, and this is also part of our research, that digital competences are necessary anyway in the digital world and in the digital age. And you could, in a way, say that the pandemic moved digital competences spot on, but they have been there before, and they will be there in the future. And the larger context of this talk is, of course, foreign language teacher education. And the interesting thing was that in the pre-COVID-19 situation in December 2029, we already conducted a questionnaire study with roughly 180 pre-service English teachers at our university on their digital competences and attitudes, because we wanted to find out whether teachers were possibly resistant to technology and digital teaching, or whether they were embracing it. And parts of that study will feature in this talk later, but the positive news already is they have high capacities and attitudes towards digital education. That's the good news, especially in view of a crisis situation. But of course, during the COVID-19 situation, we really experienced a spotlight on teachers' digital competences as a most urgent requirement. So teachers who were in service were suddenly confronted with, how can I create digital content online? How does a classroom management work via Zoom, for example? And also our whole university context was forced with digital teaching. So digital competences were really needed during that time. And maybe a post-COVID-19 perspective will entail that we have to embed digital innovation in education as a continuous lifelong learning task for professional development in times of crisis, but also without a crisis situation, because they are part and parcel of education today. And what will feature in my talk is a reflection on what does it mean for a foreign language teacher to become or to be digitally competent. A brief insight into the questionnaire study that we carried out almost a year ago. And during the COVID-19 year, this is one of our productive outbursts. My colleague Christiane Lütke and I, we compiled a book on digital teaching and learning. And we had, of course, planned this book before the pandemic, and we were writing and compiling it during the pandemic. And that really gave a, I don't know, productive spin to the whole situation. And parts of what I'm going to present will actually feature in this book. So what is our source of innovation when it comes to digital competences? We embraced the so-called framework for the digital competence of educators, also abbreviated to the CompEdu. And that was published by the European Commission in 2017. And the advantage is that it contains very concise descriptions of what it means for an educator to be digitally competent. So that's a good source of orientation for us to articulate such competences. And the call of this framework is for European countries and beyond to adapt these digital competences to institutions, to national training centers and schools, for example. And it also encourages dialogue across borders when it comes to developing digital competences. So I understand this conference here to be part of this process too. And what this framework really stresses is the role of teachers as agents of change. And when you think about the impact the digital world has on education, teachers really are agents of change. And this has even increased during the Corona pandemic, when teachers suddenly had to implement these drastic digital changes in their own education. And of course, it's about acquiring ever new digital competences, because things that are unimaginable today will be imaginable in 5 years. And at the moment, we talk a lot about virtual reality. That was unthinkable maybe 10 years ago. So this is ever changing. So we need to stay on track. And the CompEdu framework, this is the value of it. It really describes digital competences along 6 focus areas and more fine-tuned subdimensions. Don't worry, I won't talk about all of that, because that would simply be too much. But these 6 focus areas entail professional development, producing digital resources, creating teaching and learning scenarios, having assessment strategies that are digital, empowering learners in view of inclusive language teaching, and last but not least, that teachers use all their digital competence to also make their learners digitally competent. And I think this is a very precise description of what a teacher should ideally be able to perform in education. And of course, there are much more details hidden in this whole framework. As you can see, when it comes to digital resources, it's spread out into selecting such resources, creating and modifying them, and managing and storing them in a learning environment. And even that is then more fine-tuned into several can-do statements, which is an ideal resource for anyone who is interested in adapting digital competences to a specific subject discipline. And that's exactly what we did. We were thinking about what does it mean for a foreign language teacher to be digitally competent. And here we need to say that the digital competence framework, it lacks subject-specific dimensions. All competence descriptions are very general, And in order for them to work in a specific subject, the professional call and challenge for us was to make this framework relevant for and specific to foreign language education. So we were thinking about, what does it mean to create digital resources for foreign language education? What does it mean to be digitally competent for a learner? So the key question for us as foreign language teachers was, what does it mean to teach a language? What does it mean to teach cultures and also literatures in the digital age? Just think about how a lot of the cultural worlds learners encounters are increasingly digital, and that needs to be mirrored in such competences. So what we did, and this is now what I will present briefly, is we try to transfer this framework into foreign language education. For example, when it comes to professional engagement and development, it entails, for example, using digital technologies to communicate with learners. And in the COVID-19 pandemic situation, for example, this very simply entails sending out email attachments with tasks and texts to learners. Very simply, but this didn't ideally work everywhere, of course. And this also entailed seeking out digital opportunities for one's own development. So simply speaking, whenever there's a problem that I, as a teacher, cannot solve, I need to, or I can use digital resources to increase my professionalism. And in terms of foreign language teachers' professional development, what we came up with, for example, is that teachers could access video tutorials with explainer videos on new teaching methods, on how Moodle works. And for example, on YouTube, there's a lot of material online where global teacher trainers share their expertise. And in a similar vein, there are a lot of webinars at the moment from global organizations such as the IATEFL, which Will mentioned earlier. And I'm kind of friends with IATEFL on Facebook. And in my newsfeed every day, people who are involved in the IATEFL announce their webinars. So there's a lot of wealth when it comes to accessing such professional development. Or one could also join online communities, more formal or less formal grassroots movements. And I have joined, for example, the Facebook group that is called the ELT Footprint, the English Language Teaching Footprint, which brings environmental issues into education. And it's a brilliant resource to access text and task ideas when the issue of environmental protection moves into scope. Another critical challenge for teachers is to create and navigate the diversity of digital tools, resources, and technologies, and to make good choices about such digital resources. And when it comes to selecting digital resources, for example, what we have to keep in mind is that such digital resources need to mirror the English-speaking world in the classroom. And one idea we came up with was, just as an example, to use the hashtag Black Lives Matter to compile information on how the topic of racial discrimination in the US is negotiated in Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and then do a comparison of how this issue is depicted and represented. And of course, trying to encourage teachers to create their own digital resources tailor-made for their classroom. And one example could be, imagine there is a discussion on Black Lives Matter in their classroom. Teachers could create, or learners could create a Padlet to create a vocabulary collage to facilitate such communication about racial discrimination. And here you could embed images, links to audio files, for example, to video files, to create this language world that is necessary here. Another issue is to do proper learning, and this is where the framework really becomes, is put to pedagogic use. And the key question we were always concerned with, to create carefully orchestrated digital strategies. So the question is when to use which digital tools and resources for what purposes. And again, a few examples, and this is an example from my own course, which I taught via Zoom. It was a course on using films in English language teaching. And we would always watch short film clips on a kind of interactive whiteboard that would be in the classroom setting. And here It all happened digitally via Zoom. And then my learners or students analyzed a set of film stills for cinematic devices. They annotated these stills with the results and then displayed their annotated stills back for presentation into Zoom or onto a whiteboard. And this would then become the basis for a class discussion. Or part of that is also to create collaborative learning scenarios. And one thing that I did is I had my students create class wikis on film and culture related topics, such as food, for example. And then they were using digital chat and communication to negotiate the details. And all of that could work or can work in synchronous and asynchronous teaching quite well. And I'm skipping a few competence domains because I think the most important domain, after all, is to prepare learners to become citizens of the digital world. And that could entail or has to entail information and media literacy so that learners can research and synthesize information. So what could be done in terms of language teaching is to use a data bank such as the British National Corpus to research a language need, for example, collocations. And what many teacher friends, that's anecdotal evidence, did is to go into digital content creation and ask learners to create learning outcomes in digital ways. For example, by handing in presentation videos of book reviews, which could then be embedded in a digital portfolio and become the source of assessment. And as I said, we carried out an empirical study, just very briefly, pre-COVID-19, that and with this study, we try to identify what the teachers' preconcepts, pre-service teachers' preconcepts are about such digital competences that I sketched out earlier. We used Likert type scales where learners could agree or disagree to statements such as I can create new digital resources and so on. There were 44 questions in total. And I think the really positive and meaningful message here is that this is what is in the green circle. Really, most of our pre-service teachers are really enthusiastic and optimistic about digital education. Their attitudes are generally high, and their perceived competence is also quite high. And this, I think, is really a positive message because these teachers will become the agents of change in the future. And this shows that learners still assess their own digital competences differently. So they are quite good at professional development with online sources, but they feel weaker at assessment or creating inclusive settings. So for us as language teachers and educators, there is still a call to not to forget these domains. And what we think would be really interesting to repeat this study and questionnaire with the COVID-19 experience in mind. So now that everyone has been through a full year of digital teaching and learning, it would be really interesting to see whether attitudes and perceived digital competences has changed. And here are a few outlooks into a post-COVID-19 world that could entail a lot of innovation. I would recommend that we have to articulate subject-specific digital competences to become the guiding railing or bridge towards digital innovation and change. We need digital competences anyway, in times with crisis and without crisis, maybe more so in times of crisis, but also in times without crisis. We must make sure that this becomes part of continuous professional and we possess digital flexibility that is needed. And this encompasses the awareness that we can adapt to rapidly changing conditions for learning and teaching by making informed choices about everything that is available in our digital repertoire. Here are my resources, and a big thank you for giving me the opportunity to present what we are doing at the University of Munich and our English department for teacher education. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Torsten. And it's so nice that really, so you made or delivered such a presentation. It's interesting to get to know about this research. Well, thank you very much. Good. So maybe we will move to another speaker. So It's my honor to introduce another speaker. So this is Dr. Terry Callaghan, so professor of Sheffield University and honorary professor of Tom State University. Perhaps almost everyone in Tom State University knows you, because really, so you have made, well, a great contribution into the life of our university. So we are so happy that you're here with us. So you're welcome. So Terry.
Thank you very much, Tamara, and thank you, Tamara and Olga, for organizing this session. I have to say two things before I start. One is that this is the light entertainment, because I don't teach English. And the second thing is, please forgive my poor English. I come from a working class background, and I still have a lot of expressions that date back to my childhood. So what I'm going to do is to try to entertain you, and with the contributions from Olga and also from one of my sons, Chris, to look at language skills and wisdom and look at if there is a connection, and also to look at how language is changing and disappearing from an old man's perspective. And this is all provocative, so I'm not treating this in an academic way, but there are sort of 7 themes, and the aims are to discuss whether wisdom can exist without effective communication through language, and is it wise to lose language skills? And the opening slide is just very simple. Thousands of years ago, we had hieroglyphics. Now my grandchildren communicate by emojis. So this is the Egyptian hieroglyphics, the hello, how are you? And this is the emojis that children now use. So we have gone through a pathway of about 4,000 years to end up from symbols going to symbols.
I'm so sorry, Terry. May I interrupt you for a minute? We can't see your presentation.
You can't?
No, you are not sharing.
Ah.
I'm sorry.
No, I thought I shared my screen.
No. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So can you see my screen now?
No.
No?
No. Mm-hmm.
Now, that is very strange because I'm clicking.
It should be a green button.
Yeah, I tried that one. Now?
Oh, now.
No, yes. But
okay, and I'm really sorry about that. But actually, that makes an incredibly important point that we heard all these excellent speeches about going into the digital age. And when the digital technology fails, we're lost. So it's good to keep some traditional skills alive. But the first slide I wanted to show you was to acknowledge Olga's contribution and my son's contribution, but also to make the point that this is what one of my grandchildren said, hello, how are you? In Egyptian hieroglyphics and in emojis. And it seems to me as an old man that we've gone through several thousand years to go from symbols to symbols. And that worries me. So it seems to me there are too many modern ways now to avoid using conventional English language. We just used emojis. And of course, we can express something with an emoji, but there is nothing behind the symbol. There is no meaning beyond what we see in a very simple symbol. Most nations now deliver their news broadcasts with sign language. Now, of course, the intention is very good. Is for those people who are underprivileged and have problems with hearing. But again, it's a behavior where we are moving away slowly from delivered language to sign language. Mm-hmm. And then there is another aspect, which is also about moving away from using English. And this is in implicit web design. Now, this is not the explicit web design, but the implicit web design. So we don't even use a symbol or a word to know where to click. We know that if we click on the left top corner, we go back to refresh a page or go to a previous page. We don't need the words. We don't even need the symbol. So the web design is going to recognizing in this case a position rather than to recall. So we're not using memory anymore. We're just using recognition. And this conformity, because this is across all different computer languages and different websites, this conformity is leading to a loss of creativity. And the second provocation is that strategic and imprecise use of language can actually aim to mislead. So most of us use language to try to help, to try to educate, but language can often be used aiming to mislead us. And in England, we have a lot of politicians, starting with Mrs. May, whose first words on any topic were, "Let's be clear." And we can still hear that from all our politicians, but the statement is usually followed by avoidance to answer a question or also to deliver some promises. But it always starts with, "Let's be clear." And then if you look at this very simple digital design, I think if you spend a second or two on it, you will read this first, and then you will read this, and that's below, and then this one, which is still below, and then at the top, you will say, and you will read this last. And this is, in fact, the bottom line, even though in this case it's at the top. But the way the language is presented is intended to mislead. And very often people do not read the bottom line, the small text. Another example in my own field of science, which is counterproductive, is that the word observation in science has now replaced the word monitoring. And this is to fool funding agencies. So monitoring implies a continuous or periodic observations over time. It's dynamic. But the problem is that monitoring requires a long-term commitment. It costs money. So very, very few people now apply for monitoring programs to funding agencies. What they do is they translate monitoring into observation. Observation can lead to a one point in time understanding, but implies no dynamics over time. So the funding agencies will fund observation, but they won't fund monitoring. And this is deliberately misleading the funding agencies. But of course, the funding agencies are quite smart. But what it does do is provides a mess now, so that when funding agencies want monitoring, but can't use the word monitoring, then anyone can apply for that fund, even though there is no intention to have a long-term project. The third one, and there is a big red warning here, so please, please don't think that I'm using offensive language irresponsibly. I do not mean any offense whatsoever, but I am concerned that language political correctness is reducing personal resilience and disrupting society. So I've given some examples here. Lap is now Sami, Sama, or Sami, depending on which country the Sami come from. Eskimo is not used anymore. It's offensive. It becomes Inuit. Colored is not used anymore. We have to use black. And this is just an example of a guy who was the chair of the Football Association, and he used the word colored and lost his job because he should have used the word black. Now, I can understand that the Sami were offended by being called Laps, or the Inuit were offended by being Eskimos. But what I don't understand is, where is the list of politically incorrect words? When I was a child, I could use all these words without any offense whatsoever. How often is this list updated, and who updates it? So I'm extremely concerned that I might be using all sorts of language which will offend someone, and I don't know that, and I don't know how it offends them, and I don't know what the alternative word is that I should use. And there has been excellent work coming out of Tom State University showing that whatever we say is going to offend someone if they want to be offended. And we don't want to offend people, but if we are going to restrict our language so that we ensure we're not offending anyone, then this leads to infantization or coddling. And we as people and a community and a global community lose our resilience, that if we cannot accept anything that might offend us, then we can't actually interact with the world around us. And that is a very worrying sign. And it is very nationalistically separated. Some countries are not so aware of offensive language. Others are taking huge action and people are losing their jobs because they use the inappropriate word without knowing. The fourth provocation is that science and popular language are diverging, and very few scientists are good communicators. The scientists perceive a need to be impressive with their peers, not with other people, but with their peers. They have to show that they're impressive with their funding agencies, with the papers and the paper reviewers and so on. And that need to be impressive, together with journal word limits, they have to count the words in their papers, is resulting in a language that fails to communicate with the public. And I've just done one very, very simple exercise. This is just a random abstract, and I just pointed out a few problems. First of all, long sentences. This is half the abstract is one sentence. It ends here. Then we have archaic language, because it sounds impressive, espousing. Then we have inflated terms, landmark insights, unprecedented rate. And then we have unnecessary confusion, non-stationary dynamics. Well, I thought dynamics were non-stationary, but this is all impressive language. And of course, it doesn't communicate with anyone. And another aspect of this, so even though there are problems here with this science language, I think science in general is based on trust. We do the best with our language and we try to communicate and try to educate. But then I've experienced another type of use of language, which is based on the absolute opposite. The treaties and legal agreements assume a total lack of trust, and they have focused on avoiding deliberate misinterpretation. I spent 2 days with one ambassador writing 2 pages of A4 text, just because she looked at every single word to see how it could possibly be misinterpreted. And that is very negative use of language. And fortunately, within science, we are far more positive than that. Then there is the problem of simplification. And I think this is incredibly important also for all the digital talks we heard about as well. We are today stressed for time, and we seek super efficiency and simplicity to communicate. But Einstein had a very important saying. He said, things should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. We can oversimplify, and we perhaps do that in our education and digital education sometimes. Here's one example. This is in a hotel lobby. You have rooms 201 to 216, rooms 217 to 226. Which way do you go to room 205? Do you read the row or do you read the column? It's simple, but so simple that it's just totally confusing. And of course, there are cultural differences too. So this is from where I used to work in northern Sweden. These are skidoos going across a frozen lake. And now the icons are failing. So which way, is this the way forward? Because I read that as danger, keep out. So again, the icons have actually failed. And also design is failing too, very often. So this is beautiful design that should be intuitive. This is a tap, a simple tap. But this design is not intuitive. No one knows how to turn the tap on. So people are putting their hands underneath, nothing happens. So we need language, touch the end of the tap to wash hands. So this is a failure of words and icons, a failure of icons, and a failure of design. And where do we end up? We end up with language that we've been trying to avoid. Then the next provocation, something that worries me greatly, is that language can evolve very quickly. And as an old man, I see this in my lifetime, particularly with the politically incorrect language. And we lose redundant terms and gain new terms very, very quickly, and particularly if they're associated with technology. And I have 2 examples. These are agricultural implements from Yorkshire, which is where Sheffield is based. It's a county of northeast England. And this is a county that was settled by the Vikings 1,000 years ago. And up until the Second World War, all the agricultural implements and the ways of managing the land were based on Viking words. And within literally 20 years, that language disappeared. Why? Well, because in World War II, we had to become super efficient for producing our own food. So we had mechanized agriculture, tractors. So as we had tractors, new terminology came in, we left the old terminology behind, and that language died. And in contrast to losing language, we have many new terms, but they pass very quickly. So here is some carbon paper. Do students now know what CC at the bottom of a letter really means? Carbon copy? They don't know about carbon paper that was used in a typewriter to produce a copy. Foolscap, a size of paper that was used for 100 years, that's not used now. Punch cards, floppy disks, mini disks, Betamax, all data media that now are no longer used. So these terms were invented and 5 years later, they weren't used anymore. So language is incredibly dynamic. But if we lose this old terminology, we lose our history, and that is really sad. The last provocation is, has the value and enjoyment of words diminished since the advent of TV and computers? I don't think we enjoy words anymore or get the sufficient meaning from them. And this picture is something I'm proud of. It's an agreement, a legal agreement for some land, and it's on the wall of my house. And I will read you the first line, this first line here that you can't see. I will read you. This indenture made the 14th day of November in the 5th year of the reign of our sovereign Lord and Lady, William and Mary, by the grace of God of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland, King and Queen, Defender of the Faith, Anno Domini 1693. That's how they work there then. What do we do? 14/11/1693. It's boring. But not only is it boring, but we miss all the information behind when this was produced. I have to say something rather negative as well, and that was the people that produced this were paid by the word. That is why this is so long as well. But still, it is a beautiful enjoyment of language. Sorry. So the conclusions. Replacement of language with symbols leads to a loss of creativity. Use of intuition to replace language can lead to a lack of communication and confusion. Losing language leads to loss of understanding of culture and formative history. Language should be used to communicate widely, not reserved for an elitist small community of nerds like the science nerds. Suppression of language, which is about the political correctness, which has no ill intent, is divisive in society and leads to a lack of resilience. And then I'd like to come back to the Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien's work. For those of you who have read it, there is something called Ents. These are the shepherds of the forest. And they spoke very slowly with long words like many consonants, like in the Finnish language. And I joke with my Finnish friends, as the language has so few words, they speak slowly and enjoy every one. We need to preserve our written language and spoken language, be creative with it and enjoy it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Terry. So interesting. So especially for language teachers, so it's a gold mine, you know, of information. Thank you a lot. And I suppose for our students, it will be also an interesting presentation to, if you're allowed to use this material. And I agree with you completely, because especially so when it comes to the language of scientists and scholars, sometimes we can't understand any word, right? When they start talking, and politicians as well. Okay, good. Maybe questions or comments? So please. Mm-hmm. So Herman, maybe so after such inspiring presentations, so you can make a point. So please on anything. So please, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a very, very interesting panel discussion and presentations. Let me start with the last one of Professor Callaghan. I think I fully support all the things that you mentioned. But while you were talking, at the same time, I was thinking, yeah, we're getting old. So we're going to
no,
we start to talk about the past, and a little bit like the discussion that I'm involved a lot about creating new education methods, blended learning, hybrid learning, active learning. Then you're faced with many professors saying, yeah, but we do a very good job with our good old lecture. So you see, I support your points. I want to add to that, we should take the best of both worlds. So, so the language is fantastic, but at the same time, like we learned now in this pandemic situation, our new approach with the technology offers so many new possibilities, and it's so inspiring. Basically, and that's my response to many presentations given now, it shows that the problem that we faced was not a real problem, it was just a challenge. And, and every problem is a challenge and forces us and stimulates us to go better ways and to improve us. And that's a little bit the context of your lecture, Professor Callaghan, also, that don't forget the past, use the things that are very valuable, and be careful that things, like you said, do not become simplified too easily. Don't forget the expert opinions and not the easy way of information coming via us, via the internet and tweets, etc. One of the threats to find out what is real information, what is fake information, etc. A huge challenge, I think, that we are facing. And that's a little bit underlying the things that you said to some extent. When people try to simplify things, what I do all the time when I try to teach people to really transfer knowledge and insights, you go to some kind of simplification, but on the other hand, it should always be still correct and still true. And language basically is the key to civilization. Language and communication. And that is what I want to mention now in relation to something that I missed during all the presentations. And that is the availability of technology, availability of devices to take part in our online teaching. And we are confronted with Thompson International Science Program a lot with that. We have students from Africa and from Iran, and simply the internet doesn't work properly all the time. So we can make all kinds of fantastic online teaching and courses, but a fundamental aspect is to allow communication and connection with our students. And that's why I want to make a plea. I want to say to you, okay, this offers, online teaching offers so many possibilities, but who has access to that? We are very, let's say, rich people. I'm in Denmark, I'm in the Netherlands, and I'm in Tomsk. And everywhere there's a lot of facilities and technology. Although in Russia, it's already a little bit more complicated than in Denmark and in the Netherlands. But I think for us, it's easy to say that. But how can we improve that, for example, students in Africa and Asia have access to our fantastic online teaching?
Right.
I think this is crucial. And I want to make a plea. I would say, is it possible that maybe we can take all together the initiative to stimulate our university to go on an international platform and to make sure that this access to internet becomes a worldwide possibility for people in poor countries? Because education is the key to civilization, and that is the key to solving many worldwide problems like you know, the climate changes that we have to face, the wars, the hunger and food issues. Everything is through education. So if we can create education available for all those people that at this moment don't have access, I think that is the last thing I wanted to say to that respect. So fantastic online teaching, fantastic availabilities, but how can these people go into it, to all the things that we can offer them?
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sir Herman. Agree. But this is a first step, perhaps. We have to start with something. We have started. This is already very good. Okay, so any more comments, please? Comments or questions? So Miriam, maybe you would like to make a comment. So please.
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Yeah. So
Thank
did you
you.
enjoy our panel discussion? So
yes, it was wonderful. Thank you. Very interesting. Very diverse.
Yeah, very diverse. This is right. Okay, thank you for coming.
Terry, you want to say something?
Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I just come back and thanks for the comment, Herman. I wasn't against digital learning at all. In fact, I use it. And one of the aspects where I think it's particularly important in my work is to explain a process, an environmental process that naturally takes 10,000 years, and to explain that in 6 minutes with an animation, a computer designed animation. And Tom State University is excellent at producing these animations. And we've produced a lot now, and they're going around the world. So this is just one example. The other example, of course, is that we have problems in UK now with extreme safety rules for students. So when I was at school, we would go into the field into Scotland or the Lake District to look at geological and geophysical features. We can't do that anymore because the regulations are so tight. But we can now make those processes available via digital technology and actually explain how they're formed with computer graphics. So this is a type of learning that has been revolutionized, and the take-up has been really high during COVID, particularly during COVID when people that can get outside couldn't get outside for this 1 year. So I'm totally sold on digital learning, but I think that we have to be careful. So, for example, my experience is that if we use multiple choice questions, it destroys creativity. It destroys expression. And I think we need to build those sorts of skills in for people. And it comes back to Peter's first talk about how you express yourself is extremely important. And you can't express yourself through multiple choice questions. So I like a balance. I think we should see what the disadvantages are and go around them and improve. But I'm not against the technology.
No, that's not what I perceived. I think I correctly, I think, interpret that. I think you're a very modern, looking forward person. So I agree that. But you mentioned so many things that were so very true. And
yeah, that's
really,
right.
And one thing that I want to refer to also, it's an anecdote, but I will take too much time. I think it's at a certain moment I was in a discussion with an English professor, and he was so angry that at a certain moment in front of the audience he took a bottle of water and threw it over my head. So something that of course all the audience was flabbergasted, and they said, "Wow." But I stood like a rock, like a real Viking, and thought, okay, what's the problem? and later on, he apologized, and he said to me, but Herman, you always told me as a Dutchman, you have very short toes. You cannot stand on my toes. So in Holland, we always say when two Dutch people agree, we have a new political party. So, which means that we are so used, I think like the English, you know, to discussion and to provocate and things like that. And that's what that you mentioned also, that we have to be so careful to say things at a certain moment, not to insult people. Whereas in science, it's so important to be able to express our opinion and to get an opposite opinion and just drink a beer after that.
Sure.
But learn from it. And that is a very important thing that you mentioned, and it destroys politics. It destroys civilization, because you need this process to make progress.
Okay, thank you very much. So any more comments or questions or concluding remarks? Well, so Torsten, maybe you have something to conclude. Just saying, okay.
I think Terry used the word balance, and I think this is a very powerful concept, so that digital education doesn't become too normative, that like everything has to be digital now, we need access to all technologies, but that there's always this issue of integration or comparison. What we encourage our future teachers to do is to compare what they would do in an analog setting without technology and what they could do in a digital setting with technology, and then compare what is lost and what is gained. For example, students in my German classes couldn't easily travel like to US cities. And what we did is we went to US cities via Google Maps and explored the streets of New York and other US American cities. And this would simply have been impossible, because the real experience isn't available. But of course, I wouldn't go to the street next door with Google Maps, because that's in the immediate environment. And I think what we really need is this like constant comparison, seeking out integration. I think I call it flexibility. I think this is what we need, so that it's not like the demand isn't too normative or it's not too pessimistic.
Right, right. So we need balance, right? So there is perfectly right. We need balance in everything. And so by gathering together, I think we are very close to it, to getting some balance. So now we know each other. Now we respect each other, and we have respected each other. We are going to change the world. So Herman, am I right?
Yes, absolutely. It was
Good,
great to meet
good.
all of you.
Good, good. So Anastasia, maybe, so any concluding remarks?
Well, it was very interesting for me to listen to the distinguished lecturers, speakers, because in my experience, I used to teach English, and sometimes I do that. And I also need to use English to teach different subjects like trade.
Right.
And yeah, I feel it. I feel some squeezing opportunities for expressing myself today when I have to include both the digital means and to use language in the right way to make everything understandable. And those ideas, those concepts were very useful for me to understand myself, first of all, to understand the way probably I should change my teaching methods as well.
Yes, yes. This is a very good, so idea, because we are all thinking about that. So at this time of pandemic. Okay, so Terry, maybe you would like to conclude and to finish our discussion. So Terry?
Me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Well,
yeah, you're approaching language teachers already. So yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, well, I just want to thank everyone, and it's great to meet everyone. And again, the digital technologies allows us to break down national borders is incredibly important. So as an old man, I worry about conflict, and I worry about geo-conflicts from climate change. And the only way to avoid these are to break down national borders. And that starts with us. It starts with people talking together. And that's what we did. And thank you, Olga, and thank you, Tamara, for letting us meet each other, become friends, and understand each other. And we have to go out now and make more friends and more communications.
Right.
So
very, very true.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So Olga, maybe any concluding remarks as well? So we're finishing, right, as I understand?
Yes, unfortunately, we should.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, because the discussion is so interesting and
right. Well, the most interesting,
provocative to push us to think beyond traditional subject. So thank you very much for every speaker and each participant who raised questions or who just listened for such inspiring topics, and I think that it would be the best point to finish the discussion. With good emotions.
Right, with good emotions, with nice words, inspiring, stimulating, challenging. So all these words go in line, and it's so nice. So thank you, everyone, so that you have joined us. And thank you, Olga, that you have decided, together, all of us together. Yes, this is nice. Well, thank you very much. So hope to meet you someday, soon. So, okay. So goodbye.
Hope to
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Hope to see you next time somewhere or some
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.